This week, New York prosecutors launched their high-profile case against the leader of NXIVM. Investigators spent a year and a half collecting evidence to take on the alleged sex cult. Keith Raniere founded NXIVM in the 90s, and now he's facing 7 criminal charges, including forced labor and sex trafficking. The secretive self-help group has been accused of recruiting women and branding them like cattle. If Raniere is convicted, he could spend life in prison, but he won't go to jail for being a suspected cult leader because that's not a crime. And that's what makes this case so notoriously difficult to prosecute.
The court's action today means time has about run out for Ms. Hearst.
When Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the SLA in the 70s, the newspaper heiress was raped, tortured, and indoctrinated. She was also transformed into a machine gun-wielding bank robber. When Hearst got caught, she tried to use brainwashing as part of her defense. But brainwashing isn't illegal. The court determined that whatever psychological harm she endured, it was not a crime, and so she was convicted of bank robbery. Then, in 2009, 2 former Scientologists tried to sue the church. Their lawyers argued the defectors were subjected to forced labor. Scientology won the case because the court ruled it was a religious matter and no one was harmed. Alison Mack, the former Smallville star and one of Raniere's co-defendants, used the Scientology case as part of her defense. Complicated. Joining me to talk about all of this is Cameron Fisk. He's a lawyer who has experience in cult litigation. So, Cameron, a former member of NXIVM, has said that the group is a cult, but lawyers are leery of using that word. You don't like it. Why?
Well, once you use that term in any way, obviously you're setting yourself up to potentially become the subject of litigation. It's a very damning indictment of any particular organization, and there's no uniform definition for it, even though pretty much everybody accepts that such a concept exists.
I noticed that people really seemed to start paying attention to the NXIVM case when they learned about the alleged branding, like physical harm. Why did it take that? Why is there a distinction between physical harm and perhaps psychological harm?
Well, again, we're not really at that stage right now, I think, where we understand how people can be psychologically, maybe we understand in a sense that people can be psychologically coerced, but it's very difficult outside of physical violence for us to kind of have that aha moment where we understand that somebody has been victimized. It's extremely difficult to prosecute any case.
Is that starting to change? I mean, could this case change that in any way with this idea of psychological harm?
I think it does. I think the case is great because it has that double aspect to it. One of the facts is the victims in the case actually had to surrender something that they had done themselves incriminating in their life in order to gain membership in this secret organization. So something like that kind of blatant coercion, although that might not involve physical violence, we can see, of course, that's a kind of extortion that's harmful. So that's helpful.
Well, it's interesting in this Me Too age, the whole idea of consent, like, how do you have consent? I mean, is that idea starting to change? When there's this all-powerful leader, how do you know there was consent for a sexual act?
I think it has to change. I mean, one of the difficulties is, if you have, let's say, a leader who is seen as almost mythical and cannot be questioned in any way, and the people who join and who have become your friends and whatnot, your only social support network, all feel the same way, and you're basically being told that you might have to sleep with this leader of the group in order to gain whatever enlightenment or some kind of intellectual freedom. Yeah, I mean, is that really consent? I don't think it is, but again, try proving it outside of some kind of physical, or straight-on extortion type act.
It seems as if the courts, seems as if lawyers are leery of taking on prosecutions against cults. How are Canadians on this topic?
I think everybody is a bit leery about doing that. We have a great respect for people's freedom of religion. We have a great respect for people's freedom of assembly and ability to make their own choices in life. At the same time, we have certain fears. We label something a cult. That's a pretty damning indictment. If it turns out to be false, there are serious ramifications. I know many lawyers are very scared to take on these types of cases. There have been examples in the United States where the lawyers themselves have been sued by organizations that have been labeled as cults. So who wants to take on that? And so, there is a great deal of concern and risk in going after these organizations, but people should still be brave enough to do that. if, again, you feel confident that you can prove that there has been coercion, extortion, physical violence, these kinds of things.